Hey everybody, it's Omnscience and welcome back to another Omniscience Draft. As this is the second one, I'm just going to go through the rules really quick. In this format, everything is completely free. Each player starts with only 3 cards in their hand, and you get 1 mana of every color per turn to spend on abilities. So that's the long and short of it. We're going to be drafting Draw Spells number 1, followed by mainly counter spells and removal, and then big creatures. Those are the 3 things that are really good in this format, and I'll be describing each pick in more detail as we go through. So our opening pack does not have anything super powerful in this format. Ideally, the biggest, most powerful plays you can do are cards that draw multiple cards. Read the Tides and Bad Deal are 2 of the most powerful cards in this format at common and uncommon respectively. Read the Tides is you draw 3 cards, so you can really chain that into several powerful plays, like you can cast that and then cast like 3 Bone Pit Brute or whatever you draw. Bad Deal is you draw 2 cards, your opponent discards 2 cards, and each player loses 2 life. That card is absolutely fantastic in this format when everyone starts at only 3 cards in hand. You starting at 5 and your opponent starting at 1 is absolutely ridiculous, and with enough of them, enough powerful draw in your deck, you can easily chain through your whole library and just cast everything. So out of this pack, since there's none of those, we are going to take Frantic Inventory. You can set this up to be a draw 2 or draw 3 later in the game, so it can potentially be something better than just drawing 1 card like Crash Through. If Frantic Inventory weren't in this pack, we might take like Enthralling Hold or just Bone Pit Brute as a big creature or Crash Through as a cantrip. I think there's an argument for all 3 of these, but I'm going to roll with Frantic Inventory. Pack 2, what do we have? We do have a pretty good draw spell with Opt, scry 1, then draw a card. So this is almost like draw 2 in this format because everything is completely free. You are still drafting 3 packs like normal, so you'll have 15 cards per pack. That's 45 cards in your deck in general, plus 3 basics. Those are automatically going to get cut. You're never going to run a land. Obviously, you don't need the mana. So we'll end up with 42 cards pretty much, so we only get to cut 2 things out of our deck, so we're going to be full of garbage, to be honest. At the end of these packs, we're going to end up with stuff like Hobble Fiend or Anointed Chorister in our deck that's just like 2 1s and 1/1s that are just really bad at any point in the game because everything's completely free. You never want to draw one of these because your opponent's immediately going to have at worst like a 5/5 or something on the board, so Opt being able to scry 1, and if you have either of those on top, getting rid of them, and potentially drawing you into something much better is pretty good. So we're definitely going to take Opt out of this pack, I think. There is Sky Scanner and Defiant Strike. These are both fine because they do draw a card and do a little bit of something. I would definitely take the Sky Scanner over the Defiant Strike because it's a nice chump blocker, so it can block something really big once. But we're not taking either of those over an Opt. And here I might take Sky Scanner, but Twin Blade Assassins could be good as well. This is slow draw, it's not immediate draw, and the difference between drawing multiple cards over the course of several turns and drawing 1 card immediately or multiple cards immediately is pretty massive in this format. There are plenty of games that will be ending on turn 1 where you're just never going to get the value out of these things. That being said, there are games that don't. There are games where you both just end up with some big creatures on board and start bashing at each other. I feel like the chaining together draws and the prospect of really big turns is just too powerful, and I am going to take the Sky Scanner first. What do we have here? It doesn't really look like there's any card draw. There is a Library Larcenist, but this is essentially only going to draw you 1 card the vast majority of the games, and it is slow draw. It doesn't draw the card the turn you play it. You have to wait until it's not summoning sick anymore, wait till the next turn when you can attack with it, and then the moment you attack with it, it gets blocked by literally anything in this format is going to be big enough to trade off with it, so it is slow draw, but it does eventually draw you a card, so that's fine. But I think Bone Pit Brute is just going to be better. We'll just take the big monster out of this pack if we're not getting something that immediately draws a card. And bounce effects like that Spirit there I forgot to mention are really bad in this format because everything is completely free. So the only time a bounce effect is good at all is if you have a Bad Deal in your hand to make them discard the cards anyway. But most of the time it's just not good. Here we are going to take a Village Rites. As I said before, by the end of these packs, we're going to end up with some garbage in our deck, like Hobble Fiend or Walking Corpse, and turning one of those into 2 cards off the top is incredibly good. And you can also do this at instant speed, so you can chain together stuff just at any point you're doing some kind of big, massive draw chain. What do we have here? It doesn't look... I guess there's Revitalize. Revitalize is fine. Gain 3 life, draw a card. Gives you another card off the top. Try to draw something that draws multiple cards. Chain into more stuff. The biggest creature in the pack is just a 4/4. So I do like the Revitalize over that. What do we have here? Looks like no card draw, so we could take... Legion's Judgment's pretty much always going to kill something, or we can just take a decently big creature. When you're taking creatures out of the packs, you definitely want to prioritize creatures with 4 or more power specifically, because Garruk's Uprising can be a very powerful draw engine in these decks in this format. Garruk's Uprising is an enchantment. When it comes into play, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card, and then every time you play another creature with power 4 or greater, you draw another card. So Garruk's Uprising is just so powerful that if we see one of them in any of these packs, we're going to want to grab it. So if we take a creature out of this pack, I think I want to just take the Turret Ogre because it has 4 power over the creature that could get Death Touch to trade with anything, or the creature that could get bigger over time. We just want that immediate 4 power for the immediate potential to draw. And I think I will take the Turret Ogre over these removal spells because they're pretty weak. Sorcery Speed, only killing creatures, and Sorcery Speed, only killing creatures with 5 or less toughness. Both of those are not fantastic. The best removal spell for this format, in my opinion, is Secure the Scene. That is exile a non-land permanent, and that permanent's controller gets a 1/1 token. So that one's really good, because you can even hit enchantments. If your opponent has a Garruk's Uprising of their own, you definitely want to get rid of that. Or it can hit Planeswalkers if your opponent has an Ugin. So neither of those are particularly great removal here. We do have a really big Gloom Sower, but we've got Cancel and Setessan Training, and counterspells are quite good in this format. One of the very few ways you can actually survive your opponent casting Bad Deal on turn 1 is to counter it. So it is nice to have access to it. And even if you draw it later in the game, it prevents your opponent from being able to top deck into something ridiculous, because at any point in the game, if your opponent gets another turn, just drawing a single card off the top could at any point turn into them just destroying you. If they top deck Read the Sides, that's draw 3, who knows how many more cards they're going to draw off of the 3 that they've drawn off of that, or if they draw Bad Deal off the top, anything like that. So counterspells are really good in this format because they're good in your opener and they're good later in the game at just preventing your opponent from top decking away out of whatever you've got going on. So I do like the Cancel. Oh, there's Track Down as well, which is worth a mention. So this is a really difficult pick. I think there's a fine argument for any of these: Gloom Sower, Cancel, Track Down, and Setessan Training. Setessan Training probably the weakest because Track Down is also in here. Track Down's nice because you scry 3 and then reveal the top card. If it's a creature, you draw a card. The thing that's not so good about Track Down is obviously you can only draw the card if it's a creature, so you're very unlikely to be able to chain into more draws off of this, because most creatures aren't going to draw a card when they come into play, unless they're like a Sky Scanner. So that part sucks a little bit, but scry 3 plus draw a creature is nice because then you can scry in a way to set up for your next turn. Even if you can't draw your crazy sorcery in the like immediate turn, the turn you cast this, you can set it up for next turn to be like, all right, now I'll play Read the Tides next turn after I draw this random creature off the top. So I do like Track Down a lot. I like Cancel. I like Gloom Sower. I'm actually going to go with Cancel here. Gloom Sower is really nice, but I really want to have some defense. And now we're just taking everything that says draw a card. This is only a cantrip. It only draws 1 card, so maybe we could take Gnarled Sage here. I do want to go with Defiant Strike, though. I really want to go for a very combo-y route today. And as I said before, we're going to take the creature with 4 power out of that pack for Garruk's Uprising. And now we're grabbing something that's just going to be really bad. I suppose I'll take Run Afoul. Oh no, and now there's 2 lands in this pack, so I have to take another Run Afoul. I would love to cut those, but I'll take Liliana's Steward over Run Afoul. If we're going to end up playing Run Afoul, we already have 2 of them, and Liliana's Steward It isn't often going to be very good, but if you play this, you basically make them have to cancel it, or you can like make them discard a cancel from their hand later, which is cool, because that's one of the very few cards they would have just sitting in their hand. So at the absolute worst, your opponent has to hold whatever garbage they just drew so that they make sure you can't make them discard their counter magic. So out of this pack, we do have the Garruk's Uprising or Read the Tides. That's actually an incredibly difficult decision. Oh, that's so rough. I didn't notice the Read the Tides. If Read the Tides weren't in this pack, we would easily just take Garruk's Uprising, but it really, really blows to have them both in the one pack. Garruk's Uprising, as I said before, this can turn all of your random mediocre creatures into cards that will draw cards when they come to play, making you really just flow through your deck, turning all of your cards that aren't draw spells into draw spells themselves. So really, really nice card, but Read the Tides, it doesn't matter what you have in your hand, just bam, immediately draw 3 cards. So good. That's so rough. I'm going to take Garruk's Uprising first because the bots in this format don't actually draft right for drafting Omniscience Draft, so there's a very, very minor chance that we'll wheel the Read the Tides, that the bots just won't pick it as it passes around. So we'll see in pick 9 if this works out. I really hope it does, but even if it doesn't, we could pick up like a Fierce Empath or something decent. It does really, really suck to miss on the Read the Tides if the bots take it, though. Now we have Thrill of Possibility to discard a piece of garbage to draw 2, or Sky Scanner to just draw a card when you play that, or Riddle Form. You can scry 1 every turn, including your opponent's turn. You can get the 1 mana of every color, both during your turn and your opponent's turn. So I like all 3 of these. I'm going to roll with the Thrill of Possibility. Just draws the most cards immediately. This is an easy bad deal, but I'll double check everything else. There is a Sky Scanner, but bad deal is definitely better. Same with Thrill of Possibility. Bad deal's better than that. There's a cancel, but bad deal's better than that. Yeah, bad deal is the best card in this pack. Furious Rise, that's another slow draw card. And this one's actually pretty bad in this format because the other thing is you can only cast cards from your hand for free. So anything that lets you cast spells from exile, you actually still have to pay the mana costs on them. So Furious Rise, if you end up exiling a Bad Deal or a Bone Pit Brute, you just can't cast them because you only have 1 mana of every color. You don't have 6 mana, you only have 5. So Furious Rise, not really a card in this format. So we'll take the Bad Deal, and now we have an Opt, a Sky Scanner, and a Rewind for another counter spell. I'm going to go with the Opt here. I just think the Scry plus draw card is really good. I'll take my second Frantic Inventory to power up the first one and the second one. Again, the reason we're taking all these little cantrips over the giant creatures is you don't need very many big creatures at all when your deck is all draw cards. You're going to end up drawing your big creatures no matter how few you have, whereas the draw spells you really, really, really want to draw into, or your stuff like Garruk's Uprising to really get off the ground running. Out of this pack, I don't believe there's any draw. The Sanctum of Calm Waters is okay. It is another slow draw spell. You're going to be drawing a card and discarding a card at your pre-combat main phase for the rest of the game. And if you manage to draft any more shrines, the white one is pretty good in this format. That one lets you tap a creature every turn. So if you end up drafting like the white shrine to go with this, then you could potentially get 2 out at once, which is really nice. But yeah, draw 1 card, discard 1 card every turn is another okay slow draw spell because it sifts you through your garbage trying to hit your draw spells. I kind of want to still just take the Bone Pit Brute here, though. I like it a little better than the Gorehorn just for the menace plus the immediate +4 power to something else. And there's another Opt or Crypt Lurker. Definitely going to take the Opt here, I feel. Scry 1's just going to do more for us than 3 life or... Crypt Lurker, we have to like discard something or sacrifice something to draw the card too, so Crypt Lurker I think is definitely not the pick. Just Revitalizer Opt, and the Scry one's definitely better than the Gain 3. Secure the Scene, probably? I'll take a Secure the Scene over a Cetessan Training. It does say draw a card on Success and Training, but we don't have anything that gets rid of stuff on the board right now, and Secure the Scene is just the best card for doing that in this format, so it's nice to have access to one. Pick 9 here, we didn't wheel the Read the Tides, which is really rough. That is the number one thing this deck is lacking right now. We only have one card that draws more than one cards when we play it. I guess Thrill of Possibility and Village Rites, but those are conditional. We have to sacrifice a creature, discard a card to do those. So yeah, just the one bad teal and no Read the Tides is really rough right now. But here I'll take the Fierce Empath. It's just really nice. You get a little 1/1, and you get whatever big creature you want from your whole deck. Take Defiant Strike or Blood Glutton. Blood Glutton is large enough to draw a card off of Uprising. But Defiant Strike will always draw a card. I think I'll go with the Blood Glutton here, actually. Counterspell or Thrill of Possibility. I'm actually going to take another Counterspell there. I'll take Destructive Tampering. This is a nice card to end the game. If you and your opponent are just sitting there with all of your big creatures out and nobody's attacking, this just shuts off all of their blockers and lets you get in for lethal later. These are both very bad in this format, but I guess I'll take the discard card, maybe make our opponent discard a counterspell. Let's open our last pack, please. Let's see some bad deals, Read the Tides, all that good stuff. All right, there's a Read the Tides here. What does this do? Baron. When Baron Tolarian Archmage enters the battlefield, return up to one other creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand at the beginning of your end step. If a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So it's another slow card draw. That seems not the greatest. I think it's definitely just Read the Tides. Just draw 3 cards right when you play it. Get off the ground running. Llanowar Visionary would be a good wheel. Baron might be okay. Experimental Overload would be nice as well. This can return a big draw spell like Read the Tides or Bad Deal from our grave to our hand. And it spits out a creature when we do that. Another Read the Tides. There's very little we're going to take over that. We can look over the other cards just in case. But Read the Tides for this format is just going to be the strongest thing. There's the white shrine if I took that blue shrine earlier, but without it, I might still just want an opt. I mean, tapping down 2 creatures a turn is just so good. So this ability, while it says it costs 6 mana, it does cost 1 less to activate for each shrine you control, and you will control 1 shrine when you have Sanctum of Tranquil Light on the field. So this card lets you tap a creature during your turn, and then tap a creature during your opponent's turn. So it stops one of their creatures from attacking you, and it stops 2 of their creatures from blocking you, because obviously you tap one of their creatures during their turn, it doesn't untap by the time it gets to your turn, and on your turn you tap another one of their creatures. So this actually does help you just bash in for lethal when you're staring at each other with all your big creatures. So I'm actually going to take the Sanctum of Tranquil Light over the opt there. It is just quite good. I've definitely died to it before. Doesn't look like there's any draw spells here. There is Kinetic Augur. When Augur enters the battlefield, you can discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. So sift your garbage cards like Prismite into things that actually matter. That actually does seem the best here. Teferi's Protege is okay as well. It does that, but slowly. So we want the ones that do it immediately more than the ones that do it slowly. As I said before, the games in this format go very, very fast, so you definitely don't want to be relying on cards that give you value over the course of several turns, because there will be many games where you just do not have the time. Like, you'll just be dead in the next turn and stuff like that. I'll definitely take the Sky Scanner here. Best little draw card out of that pack. Opt or Thrill of Possibility. Scry 1, then draw, or discard, then draw 2. That's actually pretty close, because these are both just as good at drawing into a Read the Tides or a Bad Deal, because we opt, look at the top card, and if it's neither of those, we just shove it on the bottom. And then draw a card. So we've basically dug 2 cards deep by doing that with opt, and Thrill of Possibility, it digs 2 cards deep. But with Thrill of Possibility, we need to discard a card, and with opt, we only actually get a net gain of 1 card. We're seeing potentially 2 cards, but we're only keeping 1 of them. I'll roll with the Thrill of Possibility, I think. just again, because we are likely to have a bunch of stuff like Prismite in here. We already do have a bunch of garbage. I mean, 2 Runafowl, 2 Liliana Stewart, 1 Prismite. We've ended up with a pretty bad deck this time around. A lot of this format is luck of the draw, as you can see through all of the picks that I've made here. I think the only time I really gave up on a powerful draw spell was taking Garruk's Uprising over Read the Tides, which is just taking a powerful draw spell over a powerful draw spell. So we've taken pretty much as many as we can get here. And I'll take a Village Rites here. I mean, we've got double Liliana Stewart, Prismite, Onaki Ogre, just a bunch of little garbage. Fierce Empath and Skyscanner are good to sacrifice as well. Trackdown is okay, though. As I said before, I gave my reasoning on that one. Crash Through. Is there any creature with 4 or more power? There's not, so I'll go with Crash Through. Revitalize, I suppose. All those creatures are just pretty much too small to matter. I don't actually have that many big creatures, so I think now I'll take Gloom Sower over the Village Rites or the Crash Through. And now we're down to stuff that is just very bad. Rambunctious Mutt is okay, because it can destroy your opponent's Garruk Uprising when it comes into play, or anything else like that. If they have a Sanctum of Tranquil Light, we'd love to destroy that as well. Alternatively, Duress is really good in your opening hand to prevent your opponent from doing something insane, because Duress does basically the same thing as a counterspell in your opening hand. The only problem with Duress is it's very bad to draw it later in the game, because any powerful cards like Read the Tides and Bad Deal, they're just going to play the turn they draw them, so they're never going to be sitting in their hand unless they're sitting in their opening hand. So that's the problem with Duress. It's pretty close. It's pretty close, because I do love turn 1 Duress. But Rambunctious Mutt off the top is a lot better than Duress off the top. I suppose Duress off the top still gets rid of one of their counterspells, at least if they're holding those up, because obviously they would just use it on Duress, or we would make them discard it with Duress. Yeah, I guess I'll take Duress here. I'm not super happy about that. This is just bad. 1-2 reach. A 1-2 that makes them discard 1 card, or 3 damage to something. Pretty rough run through the Omniscience drafts here, but it's definitely quite a different experience from the last draft that we had, I feel. We got to see what happens when you don't actually just open the nuts all the time. And we're going to be running somewhat of a mediocre deck here and just trying to survive for the most part. We'll see how well we can do in the gameplay. But I'm not super excited about this deck, to be completely honest. At the same time, we've got, you know, some of the cookie-cutter good cards. Just 1 Bad Deal, 2 Read the Tides, some counter magic with Cancel. Might be okay. So I think I've cut all the cards that I feel have the lowest impact in this format. We actually probably want Liliana Stewart more than Prismite, because Prismite's just a 2-1 that doesn't do anything. Liliana Stewart is a 1-2 that does something. Either of these creatures, a 2-1 or a 1-2, is just way too small to ever matter in this format. So it doesn't really matter that Prismite has 1 more power, so we might as well keep the one that has an ability that actually potentially does something. And we cut the 1 Burn Bright, because we're never going to be attacking with that many creatures for Burn Bite to a super matter, and Destructive Tampering is just a lot better when we're on the aggressive, because just shutting off all of the blocks. I did cut the 2 Runafowl, because I don't think that's often going to do a lot, but it can kill like a big dragon if they've got a random big dragon. So I could cut something else to throw a couple of those in if I want. Like cut a Liliana Stewart for one of those. They're pretty equally unlikely to matter. Like in the one situation where Liliana Stewart matters, it's pretty good. Like when our opponent's holding on to just 1 counterspell. And then Runafowl, in the one situation where it matters, it's pretty good. The problem is both of these cards essentially have the same issue, where in any situation where my opponent isn't holding onto a counterspell, the Steward does nothing. In any situation where my opponent doesn't have a flyer, the Runafowl does literally nothing. So I guess I'll mix it up a bit. I'm actually going to throw 2 Runafels in here and cut 2 Stewards because Duress does the same thing as Liliana's Steward, making them discard a counterspell. And it actually does that even if our opponent plays around it by holding a second card in their hand after their draw step. Because Liliana's Steward, you put it on the board, it doesn't make them sacrifice a card immediately, so they know it's coming. So if they top deck something that's garbage, like if they top deck their own Prismite or something that's ended up in their deck, then they can just hold on to Prismite and their cancel, and then they don't have to discard cancel anymore. They'll just discard Prismite when you use this. So in the very corner case scenario where Liliana's Steward could actually make them discard something when they're holding on to something in their hand, they can even just play around it if they draw something bad. So yeah, we'll definitely put in Runafels over the Stewards, but that still leaves us with 1 Steward in our deck because I think we're still playing Liliana's Steward over Prismite or Burn Bright. And here is our 30 card deck. Let's get into the gameplay, see how well this one does. I am not feeling a 7-win run with this one. I think this is definitely below average in terms of the draw power for a deck of this format, but we'll see. You can always get very lucky or very unlucky in this format, as always in Magic, but this one is especially swingy. So we're on the play. We get to play Kinetic Augur, discard these 2 to draw 2, unless our opponent has Counter Magic in their hand. The problem, if they have Counter Magic in their hand, is I can't play around it, because I can't cast anything except Kinetic Augur first here, because if I do, I can't discard these cards to draw a card. So our opponent does not have a cancel in hand, which is good, so we get to draw the 2, we get to play Sky Scanner. Now we are off to the races, hoping to draw into something that draws more than 1 cards. We're doing all right so far, hitting all of our cantrips. There's Read the Tides, draw 3 more. We could actually bounce our own Kinetic Augur to discard some stuff to draw more. Now we have a couple opts coming. Thrill of Possibility we'll definitely keep. We could definitely win this game if we hit a single counter spell. I think that is the thing I would want here. Secure the Scene's okay, but it's more defensive than I'm looking for. Now that I'm off to the races in terms of drawing cards, I'm much more looking for a counter spell so I can just drop down a bunch of creatures and hold up something to counter their draw. All right, we got a bad deal. We really did it here. We've chained all of our draw spells together. The literal only thing I need now is to draw a cancel. So I'm going to play Fierce Empath before I play any more card draw. That way I'm less likely to draw a Bone Pit Brute out of my deck here. I'll go ahead and play it now. Village Rites will sacrifice our 1/1 to draw 2. Drawing an Opt and Revitalize. Scry 1. There's the cancel that we need. Now we just play all our creatures, hold up our counter magic. Could draw more cards if I want, but it's not entirely necessary. I have much more than enough damage on board to kill them now. If they somehow have 2 really good cards here, I guess they could get around my cancel, but then we'll start casting our instant speed draw to prevent them from doing something. So we'll let them play everything that draws them 1 card, because they had 2 cards in hand at the start of this turn, so there's still a second card that I don't know what it is. That could be a bad deal. They could be trying to bait out the counter by playing the draw 1 cards first. And there's the cancel for the Read the Tides, which leads to the concession from our opponent. So pretty basic game of the format there. That is what you want to do. You want to be the first one who manages to draw enough draw spells to chain into drawing like half of your deck. That way you can hold up the counter spells to counter your opponent's draw spells with lethal on board. So that's what you're trying to do in this format. That's why Read the Tides and Bad Deal are so powerful, and why our last deck was a bit better. We just had more Read the Tides and Bad Deals. So that was a good game for us for sure. So I really don't like not having a counterspell in our opening hand, but when our opening hand has Bad Deal, it's pretty much impossible to mulligan this. Being able to play first is huge in this format, being on the play, as you could see from our last game, because it is entirely possible that by being on the play, you just prevent your opponent from ever doing anything like we did. So Teferi is quite good in this format, drawing a card and discarding a card every turn. There is the Mind Rot turn 1. Luckily, we do have a draw 2 here, so we get to keep that. They could draw a card and discard a card off of Teferi, but now they have no cards in hand, so it wouldn't do anything. They would just mill themselves 1. Unfortunately, no more draw spells, but I do have a Secure the Scene to get rid of Teferi, which is very nice. Actually, I do draw a card off Defiant Strike now that I give them a creature. So Defiant Strike can't draw a creature, or can't draw a card unless there's a creature on the board to give +1/+0 to, so really nice combo there with the Secure the Scene, making a token so that I can now start trying to chain my draws together to draw into some kind of threat. Turd Ogre would be the biggest creature on this field, but there are a lot of cards they could draw into that would just be too strong for that, so I'm actually going to put that on bottom, really hoping for Read the Tides or something. Beautiful, I'll take the Read the Tides. This could very well lead into a very similar game. There's Garruk's Uprising, draw a card on every power 4 or greater creature. Now we have even more draw spells in our deck, because all of our creatures are draw spells as well now, except for like Liliana's Steward. That would be really bad to draw here. Gloom Sower draws us a card thanks to Uprising. And opt again, Sanctum of Tranquil Light. Pretty good, but they only have a 1/1 right now, so I'm actually just going to not draw that, hoping to get a cancel just for the win. Kinetic Augur's great here, discard Run-a-Fel and Duress. Duress isn't going to do anything all game. If they draw into a counterspell, I'm not going to need to Duress it, because they'll just not have anything on the board. So Duress's one use is useless in this game, so we'll just do that. We've drawn into cancel. Do we have 20 power on board? Well, thanks to Kinetic Augur having power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard, we really do. And it naturally has trample, so we're super safe here. We'll pass turn, holding up our cancel. Whatever they top deck, we counter it and attack in for lethal. Alright, they did draw a draw 2 card. So they could have maybe drawn out of that if we didn't have counter magic in our deck, which is why that stuff is very important. Alright. I wasn't feeling good about the deck at the start, but we are getting some lucky games in here. Our opponent even went first in that one and just did not manage to chain together enough draw to beat us. They even had a Teferi as well. Definitely a very threatening start. But that Secure the Scene is putting in work. So I've now beaten an Ugin and a Teferi in this format. Ugin in the first draft and now Teferi in this one. Secure the Scene putting in work. I had it in both games against the Planeswalkers as well. Alright. I do have the Frantic Inventory to draw a card even during my opponent's turn here. If I get a turn, if I draw into any creature, I'm drawing 2 cards. I don't love this, but I'm gonna keep it. I just think with the general power level of our draw spells in our deck, this is about as good as we're gonna get on average. Well, I'm gonna cast Frantic Inventory, see if I can draw cancel. Well, it sounds like, it seems like they might have a cancel of their own, because it is stopping when I'm casting stuff. Nope. What is this? Probably something instant speed. Village Rites to sacrifice a creature and draw 2. Well, at least I countered their draw 3. So that's the best I could have done there. There's a Liliana's Steward, probably running it for the same reason as us. And there's Cetessan Training to draw a card. We'll see how long their draw chain goes. Crypt Lurker draws another card. They can sacrifice the Steward or the Crypt Lurker. They choose to sacrifice the Steward. They've drawn into Defiant Strike, drawing another card. Crash Through, drawing a card. Wish Coin Crab will end the draw for our opponent. So we'll start with Revitalize. Onaki Ogre gives us a creature to sacrifice to Village Rites, hoping to draw into something. We will absolutely sacrifice the Onaki Ogre with our opponent having a 2/5 on board with us only having a 4/2. If they still only had Liliana's Steward out, there might be an argument for just not even casting Village Rites there, but I feel like it's probably not a great argument. So I am playing Turd Ogre there, even though I could hold it for if I draw a Thrill of Possibility, but I already have Duress in my hand to discard to Thrill of Possibility, which is about the worst card in my entire deck at this point. So I will discard Destructive Tampering and Duress to draw 2 off Kinetic Augur. Now we've got a counter spell up. I am not going to play Liliana's Steward in case I draw a Thrill of Possibility. I'd like to discard the Steward to draw a card. Scry 1, Bone Pit Brute. Don't actually really need that. With Kinetic Augur on board, I've already got plenty of power to take over this game. Or to just bash my opponent for lethal, really. So I can take a Brute or a Gloom Sower. I'll just get the highest power one. Might as well. And not actually going to play Steward. Still, in case I draw like Thrill of Possibility next turn. Crypt Lurker, I'll counter that, stop them from drawing a card this turn, so I can potentially just swing for lethal. And there's the concession. I don't think it would quite be lethal just yet. So if I were my opponent, I probably wouldn't have conceded just yet, because you really never know in this format. I only had one card in hand, it was Liliana Stewart. So if I drew something that didn't do anything, if I drew like a second Liliana Stewart, I'm only running one, but if I drew Run Afoul there, that's the next weakest card in my deck at that point, then I would just be attacking, trying to hit lethal, and if I didn't quite make lethal there, our opponent can always just top deck Read the Tides and just actually turn things around and win from there. But it is quite unlikely, but there is always a chance in this format, so I probably would have kept going. So I go first here, play Kinetic Augur, discarding Duress and Village Rites to draw 2. It actually might be best to just discard Duress, or do I just cast Duress and then play Kinetic Augur discarding nothing, sacrifice it to Village Rites? I'm going to keep here and I'm just going to cast Duress, just to shut off whatever draw my opponent's trying to do. Or if they have a cancel, I can bait out the cancel at least. Opponent casts a Thrill of Possibility. They have Village Rites, Onaki Ogre, and Crypt Lurker. Okay, so my opponent didn't even have anything that scary, so I don't love that. Smith 0. It does suck not having like the highest power creature in our deck here, but we still want to just draw 2. Oh wow, that's real bad. That is not a great start. But now any creature in our deck that has 4 or more power turns into a draw spell, so our Onaki Ogre, our Blood Glutton, Bone Pit Brutes, Gloom Sower. We've turned 4 or more cards that were not card spells before into card spells. Card draw spells, I should say. But our opponent freely gets to go off here. We don't have any counter spells, so however far they get, they're going to get. They have free reign. We're just hoping our opponent doesn't have like Rambunctious Mutt. I still think you always just cast Garruk's Uprising there, because the odds of our opponent having Bad Deal in their deck is very high. Because anytime you see it in a draft, you're just taking Bad Deal. And Bad Deal would obviously force us to discard our 2 cards, so that's why I just ran out the Uprising. Maybe I should have just left Steward in my hand, because it doesn't do a whole lot sitting on the board. Oh no. Sublime Epiphany, really good in this format. Because absolutely for free, counter a spell, draw a card, copy one of your creatures, return a permanent to its owner's hand. So good. Even just counter a spell, draw a card is fantastic. If you have that in your opening hand, that's brutal. So now if our opponent draws Bad Deal, they get to make us discard the Uprising, so I would hate that. But at this point, that's not even the scariest thing they can do if they draw Bad Deal. They've drawn so many cards that the scariest part of Bad Deal is the fact that it's drawing them 2 more cards. Doesn't even really matter how much it affects our hand at this point, because their hand is going off. They did have the Infernal Scarring combo, where you can throw it onto one of your creatures, and then when the creature dies, they draw a card, and then they sacrifice the creature to draw a card, so they drew 2 cards off that creature. They did draw into a Bad Deal, but that's to be expected. Every single deck is going to have 1 or 2. So there goes the Uprising. This is looking like a loss. If our opponent has counter magic in their deck, if they've got Cancel or Rewind in their hand, they basically just win, because they can shut off literally anything I draw. But if they don't have counter magic, as always, you can draw into Read the Tides or something. Draw 3 cards, and then off of the Read the Tides, maybe you draw something that draws 2 cards, and then just assemble a board. Doesn't feel super likely. Chandra's not the greatest in this format, but I have drafted her in this format before just because you can do 2 damage to something every turn, and you are keeping every single card that you draft in your collection forever, so it is nice to just get a Planeswalker in your collection. Thrill of Possibility is about the worst thing I could draw here. Obviously, we can't cast that unless we have an additional card to discard to cast it. So there's the Duress for the Thrill of Possibility anyway. We're not quite dead yet. Rousing Reed puts them to even closer to lethal, though. 6 damage from the Crypt Lurkers, plus 5 on Bone Pit. That's 11. 12 damage with the Kite Sail Freebooter. 14 damage if you add Chandra's 2 damage that she deals. So not lethal yet. Our opponent does only have 9 cards in their library. Maybe they'll accidentally mill themselves. Probably not, but we had to sit on the other side of the table at least one of these games. Our opponent is certainly in the driver's seat here. There's another Read the Tides for draw 3. Fierce Empath to draw another creature out. They don't even have another at that point. Unless they just grabbed that Gloomsower from it. I was looking away for a second, so I didn't see what they grabbed. Alright, our final turn. Our opponent is incredibly likely to have a counter. If they do, they just counter the strike, because I have nothing in hand after that. And there's the counter spell. And that is game. Dealing a crisp -25. So 3 wins and 1 loss, right? The games go so fast in this format, it's really easy to forget what your record is. So yeah, 3 wins and 1 loss. Heading into game 5. We're already at exact even if I lose the next 2, which is already better than I thought this deck would do. I thought this deck, just looking at it and seeing how the packs we opened, when I felt this deck was pretty mediocre, like right on the center of how good an Omniscience Draft deck can be. Maybe even a little weaker than average, I would feel. But we've already gotten enough wins that if I lose the next 2 games, we've done a nice 50% win rate with this deck. So I'm proud of whatever the record is at this point. Even if I lose the next 2 games, I feel like this deck did some work for how the packs went. There's tons of RNG in the gameplay of this format, but there is also the RNG of how many Read the Tides, how many bad deals, all of that you open up in your packs. So I'll keep this. Double Crash Through means I get 2 cards off the top. You can mulligan really aggressively in this format, so I could try to mulligan into Read the Tides or Bad Deal. I'm just going to hold on to this, though. Crash Through. Our opponent has something at instant speed, hence stopping during our turn. Frantic Inventory. Alright, looks like we just have some beefy creatures. So I'm going to play them all right now. They all have 4 power, so if I draw Garruk's Uprising, I am drawing cards off of them. I feel like I just play them, though, so I can actually have some threats on this board, and if my opponent also got a pretty weak start, we can try to just send all of them at our opponent's face, but I am not confident about this start. This start does look insane from an outsider's perspective into this format, but in terms of what all of the decks in this format are capable of, I am very, very not confident with this because I don't have any defenses, no counter magic up. My opponent can easily just chain off a bunch of draw spells if they draw into them here, so it is all dependent on how they draw. And Opt is going to help them scry. Scry 1 to the top, I hate that. In this format, I would very rarely scry to the top. I would only scry to the top if the card on top draws at least 2 cards, basically. Yeah, this is an issue. It is definitely looking like our opponent will go off here. We'll see how well they do. They're doing pretty well so far. Pitchburn Devils, they can sacrifice that to a Village Rites to kill my Turret Ogre and draw 2 cards. So I would not be surprised if we see that coming up in the future. Pitchburn Devils does 3 damage to something when it dies. Looks like they might just be playing creatures now. We might actually just have a board stalemate. Alright, 2 spells in hand. Possible counter magic for sure. You're very rarely just keeping cards in your hand, so they probably have cancels. Still gonna just go for it with the Defiant Strike. Try to draw a card. Alright, they actually spend a cancel there. If I were in their shoes, if I only had 1 counter spell, I wouldn't spend it when my opponent only has the 1 card in hand. Because if the top card of my deck is Read the Tides, right? if I draw it off of Defiant Strike, you just counter it. If you counter my Defiant Strike, and then next turn you don't draw a second counter spell, you can likely just lose that game, because then I draw Read the Tides and you don't have a counter spell for Read the Tides. So usually I don't like to discard the cards that draw one card, just because I can counter the card that they draw if the card that they draw is scary enough. However, our opponent could have 2 counter spells in hand, in which case that makes sense. I don't think we're getting into combat here. Pitchburn Devils just makes it real difficult, because Pitchburn Devils gets to take out 2 of my creatures off of the 1 block. They could like block Turret Ogre and kill Onaki Ogre. They do just sacrifice the Pitchburn Devils to the Crypt Lurker and kill Turret Ogre now. Two cards in hand. Not casting anything immediately makes me feel like they don't have any more draw power. They might have Sanguine Indulgence or something to return 2 creatures from their grave to hand, because they do keep looking at their graveyard. I don't know what this is. This is pretty suspicious. I guess I'll trade Onaki Ogres. I suppose they have Sanguine Indulgence then, and they would rather bring back a Turret Ogre than bring back a Rambunctious Mutt, I guess. That makes sense. Maybe they have Defiant Strike in hand or something. We'll see. Alright, yeah, if this is Sanguine Indulgence, I'm super fine with that. They're not really getting that much better creatures than they would have if I didn't just trade with their creatures. Like a 3/4 and a 3/3 that kills something when it dies is just pretty much the same as a 4/3 and whatever. Ooh, Fungal Rebirth as well. Okay, so that explains it. With the Fungal Rebirth, that can only return something that... well, if they return something that died this turn, they get 2 Saplings. So that's pretty fancy. And look, they only had the 1 counterspell, the Cancel. They spent it on my Defiant Strike, and as I said, if I have Read the Tides on top, I really disagree with that play, because I can potentially draw out of this now. Yep, I draw into Village Rites, I keep that, I cast Blood Glutton, sacrifice that, because it's got less toughness. I actually might want the lifelink, I don't know, but I definitely sack that. Now I'm gaining life, drawing a card. Now I bad deal, draw 2. Now I run afoul, or discard the run afoul to Thrill of Possibility because they don't have any flyers out. So I'm out of draw spells here. I have a Destructive Tampering coming up, which could be okay. Sanctum of Tranquil Light gives me some defense here. Do I want to secure the scene on something? Cancel makes me really happy, because now I'm just not scared of whatever they top deck. If I secure the scene, the Pitchburn Devils, it doesn't get to do the 3 damage to me. I don't love my position, but with Cancel, I think I'm actually at the advantage right now. And with Cancel, I'm more safe to use Secure the Scene, because if they draw into Ugin or some scary Planeswalker that I would want to kill with Secure the Scene, I can also just cancel it. But it would be nice to be able to have the defense for a Planeswalker and just still hold Cancel for their own Read the Tides or Bad Deal or something like that. So I am going to just hold up Cancel here. When they go to combat, we'll tap one of their creatures. So if they attack with everybody, I block their 4/2. I take 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm pretty safe here. I don't think they can afford to attack me if they're not putting any more creatures onto this board, because they lose the biggest one and only do 6. Alright, Infernal Scarring's fine. I'll just take that damage. Actually, I could just tap the Infernal Scarring creature. Then I take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Actually, maybe should have countered that because this is a threatening amount of damage. I take 1... I guess I'll just not block that one, actually. So I'll just tap down. Tap down Onaki Ogre, block Turret Ogre, take that 3. So I take 3, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's fine. Down to 7. So now on their next turn, I tap the 4/2. I have 2 4/5s to block. Or I suppose I actually tap the 3/1 now. Tap the 3/1, block the 4/2 and the 3/4, take 2. I'm at 5. That seems fine. Alternatively, if I attack with Bone Pit Brute, I should have plussed that if I was thinking about attacking with that. I should have thought before I played Bone Pit Brute. I could have plussed their Bone Pit Brute to attack for 8 here, and then I take 3, 4, 5, go to 3 life, and then I attack for 8. That was rough. I should have actually used Bone Pit Brute's ability on my other Bone Pit Brute there, because then I would have guaranteed lethal next turn. With a cancel in hand, I'm still going to make the attack, but that was a big punt on my end. Should have plus forward on that Bone Pit Brute. Then they would be at... then they'd be at 6 life, and then I would just Destructive Tampering and kill them on the next turn. So again, whatever they opt into, I'll just cancel that, so that I can't end up in a situation where I've countered opt, and then on their next turn they just play Read the Tides anyway. Unless they have 2 Read the Tides on top of their deck. Alright, so we're going to tap 3-1 and take 5. Go to 2 life. I don't love it. I definitely need to draw into something. Oh, take 4, go to 3 life. Then next turn I can just block that, take 2. I can still send in with 1 Bone Pit Brute there then. Okay. I like that this one's not attacking, I don't know why. Crypt Lurker comes into play, sacrifices a 1/1. They actually sacrifice the Infernal Scarring and draw 2 off this, so I am going to counter that because of the draw 2. And I drew into another cancel. Oh, that is real scary. So now I attack with 1 Bone Pit Brute. Actually, I might be able to guaranteed win here. If I attack with 1 Bone Pit Brute, I have 1 blocker. I block that, tap that, take 2, go to 1 life with a cancel up. 1 life with a cancel up is enough. These have menace, so I don't even need to spend the mana to tap the 1/1. All right. We guaranteed win literally against any card in the entire format now. I am pretty sure. Just because cancel. All right, cancel. Cancel, tap down the 3/1. Block the 3/4, take 2, go to 1 life. If they attacked with just 1 more Saproling here, I couldn't have done this. So, we've definitely each made a few mistakes in this game. The not giving +4 to the non-summoning stick Bone Pit Brute was a massive mistake on my end. My opponent should already be dead. And I gave them another turn to draw into something. And if I hadn't have top-decked the cancel, who knows what could have happened. So that was a big misplay on my end. I don't feel that I exactly deserve to win this game, but I'll certainly take the win. Alright, that is 4 wins and 1 loss, I believe. So we're now above average for this deck. Just gliding on by. Really close game there. Really close game. Pretty crazy one. That was a 1-turn game there. On either end, it really could have changed. Pretty insane stuff. All right, so this is game 6 then, because 4 wins and 1 loss. I go first with Crash Through and Defiant Strike. I don't love it. I'll keep it though. What do we draw into? Frantic Inventory. Not bad at all. Cancel. Well, I guess I'm playing the Mutt to draw a card off my Defiant Strike. Not getting any value off the Mutt, so if my opponent casts a Grook's Uprising, I'll be mildly sad. They're going to draw their own card off of my Mutt. You go right ahead. You have fun with that. Maybe you should have countered Thrill of Possibility there, but I'm more worried about Read the Tides. Alright, well I guess I'm just putting some decent sized creatures out. duress. Alright, I definitely should have just countered Thrill of Possibility. That's super rough. If you counter Thrill of Possibility, they still have to discard the card that they discarded, so they would have been down to 1 card in hand had I countered Thrill of Possibility. So unless that 1 card was literally Read the Tides, I think canceling Thrill of Possibility would have been right. And as we can see, it was not Read the Tides, so I should have just countered the Thrill of Possibility. Run afoul's pretty awful, but as we saw in our drafts, we had pretty much nothing else to take in that pack. So now we're at a bit of a stalemate, and my opponent has a draw engine, so I'm not feeling great here. Bone Pit Brute is the only creature I can attack with and potentially kill one of their creatures, but if they double block it, I only kill the Blood Glutton, and then I can't attack in anyway after that turn because they have a 5 toughness creature. So I'm just going to pass. We'll see what they draw into. Out of the top 2 cards of their deck, they get to pick whichever one they want, basically, with Sanctum of Calm Waters. Instead of just drawing 1 per turn, you draw 2 and keep the best one. It's like Scry 2 draw card, sort of. The Sanctum of Calm Waters. Opponent tracks down, picking up an Epitaph Golem. Alright. Nice little 3/5. And they can make sure that they don't mill out with that. They can shove cards in their graveyard back into their library. Defiant Strike. Could make my Bone Pit Brute kill their Bone Pit Brute if they double block in that way, but now I feel like they'll double block with the Golem and the Glutton, so I'm actually just going to use this main phase in case I draw another sorcery that I want to play. Rather than trying to use it as a combat trick, we just draw Liliana's Steward. That's embarrassing. Definitely drawing the worst cards in our deck this game, Liliana's Steward and Run Afoul. But I guess now, if Sanctum of Calm Waters just draws them into a cancel, they can't just hold on to a cancel, so that's something, if nothing else. We are in a stalemate now, and my opponent gets to keep putting their good cards back into their deck. It does put them on the bottom, it doesn't shuffle them into their library, so it's not anything super big to worry about, but they could turn the game into a mill game for sure. If our opponent plays like a Fierce Empath, that's when Epitaph Golem's really scary, because then they shuffle all of the cards that they put back in into their library. So I would not be a fan of that. Chromatic Orrery. That's absolutely brutal. We'd love a cancel for that, but that card is incredibly powerful in this format. As you can see, it's going to draw them 3 cards right now. So a minimum of 3 cards a turn drawn off of that, and it draws 1 immediately. So we're going to full control here so that I know I can do this in response. Okay, what? I'm going to cast with the alternate cost. Alright. So whatever, we'll just kill the freebooter rather than having a Run Afoul sitting inside the freebooter forever. They have drawn into a Read the Tides off of the Chromatic Orrery. Got an Opt going. Bad deal. Wow, our opponent has a sick deck. Chromatic Orrery, double Read the Tides, bad deal. Epitaph Golem for the late game. Opponent is doing a lot of cool stuff here. Shipwreck Dowser, that is game. So there's an infinite combo with Shipwreck Dowser and Read the Tides. You can return 2 target creatures to their owner's hands off of this. So you return your Shipwreck Dowser and anything with a good enter the battlefield effect. So they could return Shipwreck Dowser and Bone Pit Brute there, and then recast the Dowser to pick up Read the Tides, pick up Dowser and Bone Pit Brute again. They could do that infinitely to give Blood Glutton 20 power, and then they can Read the Tides picking up Dowser and one of my creatures. They do that 4 times, I have no creatures on the field, and they have a 20 power Blood Glutton, I immediately die. So they had the option of doing the Read the Tides infinite combo with Shipwreck Dowser, but our opponent also has Teferi's Tutelage, so that is another win condition they can have with a bunch of cantrips, draw spells. They can use Teferi's Tutelage every time they draw a card we're milling to just mill our library and win the game that way. So that looks like the route they're taking. That route is not as cool in my opinion, but they might not know about the Shipwreck Dowser plus Read the Tides infinite combo. That makes Shipwreck Dowser a very high pick in this format, actually, because not only does it allow you to recast something like a bad deal, but it also gives you the versatility of having an infinite combo with one of the most drafted cards in the entire format. Basically, every deck you're going to have is going to have at least 2 Read the Tides on average. And if you have Read the Tides in your grave and you have a Shipwreck Dowser, if you have any creature with an Enter the Battlefield effect, you can do that Enter the Battlefield effect infinitely. You can draw infinite cards with Llanowar Visionary, you can give infinite plus power with Bone Pit Roots, all of that kind of stuff. So that is pretty good. So with Epitaph Golem, our opponent can't mill out. They can just keep using this ability to put cards back into their library. So even though they're at 2 cards and we're at 5, they're going to not mill out. So they are guaranteed to win this game. So I'm just going to concede there because, yeah, they super won that one for sure. Kind of surprised I did get an extra turn there, but I suppose they didn't have enough cards in their library to actually keep drawing cards to mill me with tutelage, which is a little funny. That's almost never what you expect. The player with the Teferi's tutelage actually ends up with a smaller library than you by the end of it. Super weird one. So we're at 4 wins and 2 losses. I'm very happy at this record with this deck. As I said before, not the most exciting, most crazy stuff in the packs. I think, as much as I love Garruk's Uprising, I think if I could redraft this deck, I would probably take Read the Tides over the Garruk's Uprising now. Because it's kind of similar to the argument that I was saying about slow draw versus immediate draw, where the immediate draw can chain you into a 1-turn kill, and a lot of the games in this format are 1-turn kills, where Garruk's Uprising is potentially immediate draw because you are drawing a card if you have a power 4 or greater creature out the turn, or the second you play it, and then you're drawing more cards the second you play creatures with power 4 or greater. But in my deck, I don't actually have a ton of creatures, so there was like that other game where I had Garruk's Uprising out and it didn't immediately draw me a card, where if that was Read the Tides, it's just always going to draw me 3 immediately. So I think Read the Tides would have just been better. But, you know, the Uprising seemed fun, so I can Duress here. At the worst, I get a counterspell out, and at best, I can get like a bad deal. If my opponent has a good hand, at worst, I get a counterspell out, I should say. I'm going to opt here to see if I can draw into a counterspell. I may as well leave the inventory on top so I can put it in my graveyard, because if I scried this to the bottom, I would have just drawn into whatever instead of the inventory. But if I leave it on top, I just put the inventory into my grave instead of the bottom of my library, basically. So opponent has Fierce Empath and Tome Anima. We'll get rid of Track Down. Not too scared about their hand, especially because they're going to get a bad deal. So their 2-card hand is gone. Now we have Read the Tides, and I'm very happy about the choice I made with Frantic Inventory of choosing to cast it instead of putting it on bottom, because that's why you do it. Now Frantic Inventory draws me 2 cards. And we've got a cancel up with double Bone Pit Brutes. Let's see, 4. I've got 5 power out, now I've got 9. 10, 11, 12, 13. Not quite at a 1-turn kill yet. But we've got the cancel for their first turn that they can survive. Just seeing if we can draw into Kinetic Augur or something. That would be enough power to win the game no matter what they have. Garruk's Uprising is super sick here. Here's a Fierce Empath. That should give us enough power. We're at 13 power now. 13 plus 8, that's 21 power. We cast Gloomsower. Don't even need to keep spinning the wheels if I draw more draw spells. Yeah, we drew a Thrill of Possibility, but let's not waste our opponent's time. Pass the turn, cancel whatever they play, and swing for lethal. And here is 21. And there's the concession from our opponent. So, pretty brutal game. Won the coin flip of being able to play first, and then drew into a bad deal after duressing our opponent down to a 2-card hand, so that was definitely not a good time for our opponent, but that brings us to 5 wins. We're sitting pretty with the, I believe, 650 gems as our prize. It costs 750 gems to play this, so at worst, we keep all the cards that we got, or keep all the cards we drafted and open another pack at the price of 100 gems. So we're doing pretty well on the prizes, for sure. I go first. I have Sky Scanner to draw a card. If I draw into a power 4 or greater creature, Garruk's Uprising will draw a card, and Defiant Strike draws a card as well. I'll keep it, but it's very dependent on what we get off of the top. It is stopping to our opponent's turn, so they have an instant. Could be Thrill of Possibility, could be a cancel. Here is a Frantic Inventory. Or I guess our opponent is stopping in my turn. I actually misspoke that. All right, well that is going to end things right there. Garruk's Uprising and just hold up a Run Afoul for a flyer or secure the scene for an Ugin. As said before, with how powerful the starts in this format can be, I'm feeling pretty scared of what's coming from my opponent. If they have a bad deal, I'll have a very bad time no matter what they draw after that. And if they have the draw threes like Read the Tide, they can just go absolutely insane here. They're drawing a lot of cards, that's for certain. Rise again on the Gorehorn, sure. Infernal Scarring, so they draw another card when it dies, and they just pass the turn. Read the Tides is really good here. I'm very much hoping they don't have a counter spell. I'm actually going to secure the scene first and see if they counter that, because this is a removal spell that will kill their 9/3 and kill it in a way to where they don't even get to draw the card off of Infernal Scarring. So I'm casting Secure the Scene to try to bait out their counter spell so that I can cast Read the Tides. They don't counter it, but with how long that took, I feel they almost definitely have a counter spell. That being said, if I never play stuff, they're just never going to counter anything. They'll never have anything to counter, so we're going to try it. We're going to try the Read the Tides, and there's the Rewind. Very well played from our opponent, not choosing to counter the Secure the Scene. And now we're in a top deck war, our opponent with 1 card in hand, and myself with 1 card in hand. We don't know what that card is, but it's probably something useless. And they have top-decked a Read the Tides. I know that they top-decked it because you literally never just hold on to a Read the Tides in this format. So whatever their other card in hand is, I'd assume it's just something like a Run Afoul, or it could be a second counterspell. But I feel like if they had 2 counterspells in hand, they would have just countered the Secure the Scene immediately. Rambunctious Mutt from our opponent to kill Garruk's Uprising is very rough. Again, this is another game where I'm really feeling hurt by not keeping a Read the Tides instead of Garruk's Uprising. Or not picking a Read the Tides instead of Uprising. I was really hoping for the wheel from the bots there, and that was much too bold. Oh, you hate to see it. Now we've drawn the 4 power creature that would have drawn a card off the Garruk's Uprising. That hurts a lot. But our opponent is still stopping in our turn, so they have something instant speed in hand. It could be another counterspell, in which case it probably wouldn't have mattered. I'll take 8, I suppose. It's looking like this might be the end of the road, folks. Village Rites? Alright, let's see. Show me the counter. Counter it and put me to 2 life on board. Yep, there's the counter. Not quite dead on board, so I'm not going to concede yet. We're going to 2 life here. And what do we draw into? Opponent has another Gorehorn, doesn't really change things. Kinetic Augur to draw 1 card. We'll see if they have another counterspell. Opponent's deck is pretty good. I don't think I've seen a single dud card. The closest to a dud is Rambunctious Mutt, and that got to kill our Garruk's Uprising, so they don't really have duds. No! Oh, okay. Alright. Oh, dear. Right after saying that my opponent doesn't have any duds, it's like, well, here's all of ours! Ended up with the triple Liliana Stewart, double Run Afoul. We had to have some amount of duds in this deck with what showed up in our packs, and let's have a bunch. I'm going to choose to die to Gloomsowers, Becoming Blocked ability. over anything else, because that's the coolest way to die. Let's go to 0. I'll also run afoul them, because why not? Why not? There's another council from our opponent. That's what I felt like. I felt like even though they didn't counter the kinetic auger, it seemed like they still had more counter magic with how long they were thinking about that as well. But then they were like, well, they've only got one card in hand, so that's just going to draw one card. If they draw something scary, I can just counter that one card. So they were doing that play that I was saying where you just counter the thing that they draw rather than the card that draws the one card. So yeah, that was a pretty fine run of Omniscience Draft, all things said. Definitely better than what I expected from the deck. I'll absolutely take it out of that run. Claim our prize, open up our booster pack, and do our nice little outro here. As always, I would like to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to stick around, like, comment, and subscribe. I will be... Oh no, my packs are broken. I'm trying to open a Zendikar Rising pack. I'll be back tomorrow with another Omniscience Draft, and after that we'll be doing some Ravnica Allegiance drafts. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So as always, especially recently, there's been a lot of comments on the first Omniscience Draft video, so thank you everybody so much who watched that and has been commenting and enjoying the format, enjoying my videos as well. Thank you all, seriously, it's been really cool. So as always, at the end of the video, I would just like to thank you and let you know that I'll see you tomorrow for another Omniscience Draft.